Welcome to the Jay Sizzle podcast. Today, I'm going to be going over individual football team episodes once again. Put the Miami Dolphins one up not too long ago, so go ahead and check that one out if you guys haven't seen that one yet. And, we're going to keep rolling these out. Hope to finish all 32 teams before, the season starts. Kind of give you guys a preview of what I'm thinking, how you think this season is going to go. Really excited for football season this year. Probably more excited than I've ever been, really. To be honest, always excited for football, but this year just feels different. There's like a ton of excitement this year. Madden just came out, right? Fantasy's coming up for myself, and I'm sure a lot of you guys' fantasies already happened, right? The drafts and stuff, and I'm sure those are coming up. So there's a lot of things, a lot of interesting players on teams this year, a lot of changes, right, being made. So it's going to be an incredible year for the NFL. I think it's going to be one of their best years ever. But with that being said, I'm going to get today into one of the teams that I think is really exciting, that I'm going to have a really good time talking about. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is the first year under center where Ben Roethlisberger is not the quarterback in, 18 years, something crazy like that. So, Big Ben going to go down as a Hall of Famer, going to go down as the greatest Steelers quarterback to ever play. Now we're looking at something a little different here at Pittsburgh, right? We're looking at a different situation in Pittsburgh where we have Mitchell Trubisky, right, coming over, from Buffalo last season. He was in Chicago, as you guys know before. Had a couple decent years in Chicago and then kind of fell off, play-wise a little bit there towards the end. And then went to Buffalo and obviously backed up Josh Allen, so didn't get any playing time at all. So now, right, you also have Kenny Pickett, right, the rookie quarterback this year out of University of Pittsburgh. He was solid at Pitt, and he's looked really good in his preseason. He's played a couple games in the preseason already. And he's looked really solid. I'm not going to lie. I think PFF had him in an 87, 86 grade for his preseason action that he played this preseason. He looked good. He looked poised in the pocket. He was able to make a lot of throws that people didn't think he could make quite yet. So he looked pretty spectacular. And I think, talking about this quarterback position, obviously Mitchell Trubisky is a starter, right? We know that. But we could see, a situation where Kenny Pickett could be a starter by the time the year ends, right? It's all going to depend on how Mitch plays, right? So when I look at Mitchell Trubisky, right, I look at a quarterback who, struggles with a lot of pressure. I think this will be the most pressure he's ever faced in his career. There's no pressure in Buffalo because he wasn't a starter, right? There was a lot of pressure in Chicago, especially the year after they lost to the Eagles in the playoffs, because he was coming in and some people had him win an MVP. You might look at me like I'm crazy, but go look at the odds. I don't know what year, maybe 2019, before the year started, but some people thought he could possibly win MVP. So there was a lot of pressure there, and there's more pressure now because he just fought really hard for that starting quarterback spot. He barely got it. He got it, but now he understands that if he makes a couple of mistakes, he can lose that job right away to Kenny Pickett. So I think there's a lot of pressure on him. I think also playing for Pittsburgh, one of the most storied franchises in all sports, that brings a lot of pressure too. But I think Mitch might play pretty well. I think he's going to come in. I think, it's going to be a new situation for him, right? Yes, his third team, but really his second team in reality because it's the second team he's going to be playing for. I think it'll be a good fresh start for him. I think Chicago was a horrible coaching staff, just a really bad organization. Pittsburgh is one of the three best organizations in football. They've been that for 40 years. Great head coach in Mike Tomlin, great offensive coordinator they got over there. In Matt Canada, so that should be, really interesting to see how Mitchell Trubisky fits into that system in Pittsburgh. And I don't think Kenny Pickett will be a starter until next year because I think Trubisky will play a good year, and we'll talk about the record later, what I think he'll do in those games. I think we'll have a good year, but I just don't think they'll look at it and be like, hey, this is the guy that we want for our future. I think they'll say, hey, we drafted Kenny Pickett last year. We want Kenny Pickett for our future. That's the main guy we want, right? We drafted him for a reason, but I do think Trubisky will have a solid year. I think I'm thinking like 23 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, probably a little south of 4,000 yards in the air, and probably around 200-300 yards rushing and 3-4 touchdowns rushing. I think a lot of Mitchell Trubisky's success is going to be predicated on how good that offensive line is, right? It's a very shaky offensive line. I think that bringing in someone like James Daniels from Chicago, I think that's really going to help them a lot at the right guard spot. If you look at the right tackle spot, Okafor, right, he's kind of been on and off the last couple of years, so hopefully now, him coming into a role this year, hopefully he can, be solid for them, right, because, that right tackle spot is obviously going to be the most important spot, in my opinion, on the offensive line, other maybe than center, right, that's the only other spot you can argue. So, we'll see what happens. The offensive line, I say they're probably like a C-plus team. Which obviously isn't great for Mitchell Trubisky, but even in Chicago, he didn't have good offensive line protection, so that's not going to be different, right? The thing that's going to be different is what I talked about a few minutes ago, right? not even 2 minutes ago, is the fact that he's going into a much better organization with much better weapons than he ever had in Chicago. So now we'll get to kind of see, hey, what can he do, right? With a better team and a better system. So it'll be interesting to see. And I talked about a lot of his success is going to be predicated on his offensive line. A lot of his success is also going to be predicated on how Najee Harris is able to run the football, right? We're looking at Najee Harris as a top 10 running back already coming into his second year, and we expect Najee Harris to take that leap to get towards those top 3, top 5 running backs in the league. I expect him when the year ends, by the end of this year, I expect us to say Najee Harris is the top 3 running back in football. You may look at me like I'm crazy. You may think, hey, you're crazy, but I do expect that. I think Najee Harris is that kind of talent. I think he's incredible. His strength and his ability to run guys over, stiff arms. It's hard to bring him down. It makes him a really tough runner. Yes, he's not going to average a lot of yards per carry, but he's going to wear defense down throughout the game because they're going to give him the ball a lot. And they gave him the ball a lot last year, right? And that was his rookie year. So think about how many more times they're going to give him the ball now with somebody playing it behind center, not named Ben Roethlisberger, that they don't trust. Now they're going to give Najee the ball even more because A, it's his second year, and B, they don't have a quarterback they trust as much as they did with Big Ben last year. Just to give you a reference, Najee Harris averaged 3.9 a carry last year. Not horrible, right? Pretty solid, honestly, for the amount of carries he got, the more I think about it. 307 attempts for 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, and then he also had added 467 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns, which was really incredible too. So had, almost 1,700 yards from scrimmage. Which is just incredible for a rookie. And I think that rookie year from Najee Harris kind of got underlooked, in my opinion, because all the focus was on Ben Roethlisberger. It's his final year. People were sad about that, and I get that. Ben Roethlisberger is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever step foot on the earth. But at the same time, if you look at what Najee Harris did last year, there should be a lot of respect towards his name, right? I think right now he's probably 7 or 8 in terms of the best running backs in football. I think, like I said, at the end of this year, get him into that top 3 range, right? He's going to make life tough for defenders, all year. Opponents that play the Steelers, they're going to have to really deal with Najee Harris's ability to run guys over and his ability to, really wear out a defense, right? That's what makes Najee Harris so tough. And you've seen the offseason workouts, right? If you guys have seen the videos, I've seen a couple. He's been working like crazy, and he looks even better, right? And I just, look, I think Najee Harris could end up being the best running back of football very soon. Maybe a couple more years for that, but I think he can. And I think this is the year where you'll say, hey, Najee Harris is with those elite guys like the CMCs, the Derrick Henrys, the Jonathan Taylors of the world. Najee Harris is right there with those guys. He's in that same category. I think he'll be saying that at the end of this year. So definitely something Trubisky should be happy about, having a running game like that. He never had a running game like this in Chicago. David Montgomery was good, but he's nowhere near the level of Najee Harris. So having Najee Harris, and then, they had Tariq Cohen, he was solid, but not Najee Harris. Having Najee Harris, is big time. And it's really going to help his team out a lot. Hopefully the big thing is that he doesn't get hurt, right? Last year he was okay. He was fine with injuries. I don't think he got hurt last year. He was good at Alabama. He didn't really get hurt at Alabama. So hopefully he can continue to stay on the field. And if he can, I think he'll be the best running back in football very soon. And also another thing to add on to that, you got to understand that Pittsburgh is a very run-heavy team, right? They've always been for years, even with Ben Roethlisberger behind the helm. Yes, they've always had incredible receivers, but they've always been a very heavy run team, right? You looked at Le'Veon Bell, right? There's just been so many running backs that have come through Pittsburgh and really especially under Mike Tomlin, and really just ran the lights out of the ball, right? So I think that, you'll see the same thing with Najee, continue to give him the ball a lot, continue to, let him take pressure off Mitch and see where it goes from there. So now I feel like, one thing I have to get into now is talk about the receivers on this team, right? Definitely one of the strong suits of this team. So wide receiver 1, right, is honestly probably one of my 3 favorite players in football. I'm going to talk about him a decent amount here. I feel like I have to, because of his performance the last couple of years. Wide receiver number 1, Deontay Johnson, right? I really do think that if I were to name, and not even being biased because he's one of my favorite players, just being straight up honest, if I were to make a list of the top 10 most underrated players, I think if you didn't have Deontay Johnson on that list, I think you honestly don't really know that much about football. I really don't. Because if you look at what Deontay Johnson has done the last couple of years, 107 receptions last year, the year before just under 100, I think he had 97. 1,161 yards with 8 touchdowns last season. Averaged 10.9 a catch, which is very solid as well. Deontay Johnson, a couple of years ago, got made fun of all the time because he doesn't have good hands. He drops the ball. Last year, only dropped the ball like 2 times, I believe. His hands have gotten really good. his route running is incredible. His release is great. He's very quick. And, he's a guy who racks up a lot of catches because in that system they throw a lot of short balls to him. But he's great. He's great when it comes to run after catch, right? He's going to break a lot of tackles because he's tall. He's got a great body for that position. He's really quick. He's got really quick moves where he can kind of get past the guy really quick with a juke move or spin past the guy. He's really good at that kind of stuff. He's a very high IQ player too. He kind of knows. You can tell when he's running his routes. He recognizes defenses really well, and that's something that he's talked about in interviews that I've watched. Right. So big fan of Diontae Johnson. I think Trubisky's going to love Diontae Johnson. I think it's going to be the best receiver he's ever thrown to in his career, personally, if you ask me. I'm a big fan of Diontae Johnson. I think this year, I'm going to go 104 catches. I'm going to go down on the catches a little bit because there's other, you added a rookie receiver that we'll talk about in a second. But I'm going to go 1,200 yards. I think he'll go for a little more yard-wise. I think he'll go for 10 touchdowns, double-digit touchdowns on 11.3 yards per catch, I believe. So that's what I'm thinking for Diontae Johnson. So, yeah, I expect a big year. I expect another Pro Bowl year for him. It will be his second Pro Bowl in a row. For a guy who's still very young in this league, got his contract extension just this past offseason, I believe. So that was really good to see. Definitely worth, the 2-year, $36 million deal they gave him, making him one of the highest paid receivers in the league. I mean, if you ask me, right, this is just what I'm going to tell you what I personally think. I think top 15 for him as a receiver is respectable, right? And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to name a couple guys, right? And you guys let me know in the comments what you think, right? Let's start division-wise, right? We'll make this quicker than you think. It won't take too long. Miami has one receiver better than him, Tyreek Hill. Buffalo has one, Stephon Diggs. Do the Jets have one? Do the Patriots have a receiver better than Diontae? No. So we have two receivers. Let's go to the Pittsburgh division. He's obviously the best receiver on Pittsburgh. Cincinnati has Jamar Chase. I don't think T. Higgins is better than Diontae Johnson. Cleveland, Amari Cooper. I personally don't think Amari Cooper is better than Diontae Johnson either. Not a couple years ago. Not anymore. Nobody from Baltimore, I don't think. So that's three receivers. Now let's go to the next division, Jacksonville division. Does Indianapolis or Jacksonville have a receiver better? No. Does Houston have a receiver better? I personally don't think so. Does Tennessee? Would you say Robert Woods is better? I don't think so. He didn't play last year at all, so I can't really say much. So we're stuck at three receivers now, right? Let's go to the final division in the NFC. Let's go to the Denver division. There'll probably be a couple receivers here. Devontae Adams is better than him, right? We know that, right? No doubt about that. Anybody on Kansas City better than him? And we're not talking about tight ends, guys, just so you know. We're talking about only receivers. No, nobody on Kansas City is better. Tyreek's not there anymore. Juju's our number one. He's solid, but he's not better than Diontae. We saw it last year in Pittsburgh, the last 2 years. So he's not better than Diontae. Denver, no. We already went over the Raiders, the Chargers. I would say Keenan Allen's better, and I think Mike Williams is a little better. That's 6. Okay, let's go to the NFC. I think in Dallas you have CeeDee Lamb's better. I don't think Michael Gallup's better. Nobody from the Giants is nowhere near as good as Diontae Johnson. That might be one of the worst receiving corps in the league. And then you go to, we already talked about the Giants, right? We talked about Dallas, Philly. I think A.J. Brown's better. I don't think Devontae Smith's better. The final team there is Washington. I think Terry McLaurin's better. That's 9. Let's go to the next division. Let's go to Green Bay. Anybody on Green Bay better? No. Minnesota, Justin Jefferson's better. I don't think Adam Thielen's better. Nobody on Chicago's better. So that's nobody on Detroit's better. Atlanta, no receivers on Atlanta are better. Even a healthy Calvin Ridley's not as good as him, I don't think, and he's suspended. Let's go to Carolina. I think DJ Moore is better. That's 11. Robbie Anderson's nowhere near. No disrespect. Robbie Anderson's probably pretty close, but he's not quite. He had a bad year last year, but I expect better this year. Sorry, it's taking long, guys. Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans. Anyone in New Orleans better? I mean, look, you guys may hate me for this. I think he's better than Michael Thomas right now. Michael Thomas hasn't played 2 years. So I'm not going to speak on Michael Thomas and say, oh, Michael Thomas did this 3-4 years ago. It doesn't matter. Right? I mean, the guy wants to run a slant route every single play, right? You gotta expand your route tree a little bit. Yes, when Michael Thomas is healthy and he's going, he's one of the top 5 receivers of football. But I haven't seen him play 2 years, so I'm not going to put Michael Thomas in right there right now. I think Michael Thomas is probably a little worse than him right now because I haven't seen Michael Thomas in 2 years. So I don't know what he's been doing the last 2 years. I don't know if he's been sitting at home or if he's been playing video games. I really don't know. So no, we talked about Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans, Tampa. I think you have Godwin and Mike Evans. That's 14. That's 13 guys right there. Sorry. Final division. Seattle, nobody. Arizona, DeAndre Hopkins. If you go to the Rams, you have Cooper Kupp, right? And then the final team in that division, you go to the 49ers. Sorry, my bad. That's the final team, Debo. So I think DeAndre's 17. 16, 17. 17. 17th best receiver in the league, in my opinion. I don't think there's any controversial ones in there. Like, for example, like I think Jalen Waddle's incredible, but I'm not going to say Jalen Waddle's better than Deontay Johnson. Maybe this year he will be. I don't think so, honestly, but I don't think he's better, personally, right? That would be a debatable one. Another debatable one could be, Michael Thomas, but he hasn't played in 2 years. I'm not going to go over that again. So I'm not even putting Michael Thomas top 20 right now, to be honest with you. I'm putting him around 25, 26. Guy hasn't played 2 years. I don't care what he did 3 years ago. He hasn't played 2 years. So when he decides to get back on the field and play, then we can talk about him. I think at the other receiver spot, you look at Chase Claypool, right? Somebody who had a really good rookie year, and then last year kind of, went downhill a little bit, in terms of receiving. I know, 59 catches, 860 yards, only had 2 touchdowns compared to his 11 the year before. So that was something that Steelers fans weren't too happy about. They also weren't too happy about his maturity, right? If you look at the Vikings game, for example, you saw what he did, celebrating the first down, right? When he had to give the ball back to the ref and taking up multiple seconds, 5-6 seconds in that game. That literally did come down to the last second, so he cost them another play, even almost 2 with 6 seconds, probably 1. But at the end of the day, man, every play makes a difference. They could have won that game if he didn't do that. So, that maturity stuff, I think, is part of the reason they got rid of Juju. Too much immaturity, and I think that, I hate to say it, I think that if Claypool turns, even if Claypool has 700 yards like he did last year, which isn't a bad year by any means, it's a very solid year. I think that they'll move in a different direction away from him because I think that Mike Tomlin doesn't want to keep putting up with this anymore. You could tell he was kind of over it with Juju, and I think he'll get over it with Chase Claypool, right? Claypool made the comments about the Browns, a couple years ago. He had that whole thing with, it's just so many things. He's never willing to he never owns up to his mistakes when he makes them. That's part of just being a bigger person sometimes. And he always has excuses all the time. Every time they lose or every time something happens, there's always an excuse, right? He still acts a little bit like a child. So that's my only problem with Chase. I think he's an incredible talent. I think if he just stays more focused and just owns up to his mistakes, I think he can be an incredible receiver in this league for a long time. I do, but that's the big thing with Chase. Own up to your mistakes and understand that, when you make mistakes and it's on you, take the blame for it. Don't say, oh, it's the offensive line's fault, or take the blame for it. Don't act like a kid anymore. I'd say the next, looking at the next receiver spot, you obviously have to talk about the rookie that they drafted, George Pickens, right, out of Georgia. Incredible player, I think. You look at him in preseason, right, a lot of aggression to his game, a lot of physicality, right? That's how he beats you off the line. He's going to be with his physicality and his aggressiveness, right? He's very decisive. So I think George Pickens is going to be incredible. I think George Pickens is going to eventually be a number 2 receiver for this team. I think that's why they drafted him, because they want to get rid of Claypool. They don't believe in him long term. They don't believe that he can focus enough. They know his talent's there. They just don't believe he can focus. I think George Pickens was an incredible underrated pick. Might go down as a steal of the draft because they got him in the second round. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to go for 800 yards around there, that 8 to 850 yard range this year. 7 touchdowns, 5 to 7 touchdown area. I think for looking at 50 to 65 catches as a rookie. So I think you're looking at a very good rookie year from George Pickens. And I think that, I think the goal for Pittsburgh here when they drafted George Pickens was, yes, like I said, to replace Chase if Chase doesn't continue to play well, and also to replace Juju, right, because they traded him. But I think another thing is they're hoping that George Pickens can have a really good, and Deontay Johnson, both, but let's stick with George Pickens here. That's my fault. Can have a really good connection with the quarterback they drafted in the first round that I talked about earlier, Kenny Pickett, right? They hope that is their future duo right there in Pittsburgh. And Deontay, right, Johnson, right? They hope that that's their future duo right there. And they want Kenny Pickett and George Pickens. They want that to be their future go-to duo for the next 8-9 years, right? They've talked about it. You can hear it on the Pittsburgh radio. If you guys listen to Steelers podcast ever, I have listened to a couple. They talk about it all the time, right? So, look, when I look at this team, right, we'll get to the defense in a second. When I look at offense, I think the offense is probably, I would grade them at a C. I think a lot of that just comes from offensive line being a little shaky, and I think the quarterback spot being a little bit questionable still to this point. But I do think that this is an offense that's turning a leaf very quick. I do like this offense a lot in terms of where I think they could be in a year or two from now. I really do. I like Deontay Johnson, right? I'm not the biggest fan of Chase just because some of the things he's done, but I think he's an incredible talent. If he stays focused, he'll be on this team for a long time, and he'll get a big payday soon, right? George Pickens, we talked about him, right? Huge fan. Najee Harris, I think he's great. I think if they can beef up their offensive line, and I think if, Kenny Pickett can come in and be a good quarterback in a year or so, I think this is an offense that could be really, really good for a long time. They're very young in Pittsburgh. Oh, and let me talk about the tight end spot a little bit. You have Pat Freiermuth, right? And I think that you looked at his rookie year last year, right? He had a very underrated rookie season last year that nobody really talked about for some reason. I don't understand why nobody talked about Pat Freiermuth's rookie year last year, right? If you look at the stats, right? I mean, they say it clearly. 60 catches as a tight end as a rookie, very solid. 497 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's where it really sticks out to me. But here's where it's really good to me too. Incredible blocker, and everyone knows. Yeah, it's great when tight ends have a lot of yards and a lot of catches and touchdowns. But if you're a tight end, you need to know how to block super well to be a good tight end. You need to have that combination. Look at the way Kelsey blocks. Look at the way Kittle blocks, right? Look at the way Pitts blocked. Obviously, I think Pitts is the one, that of those three, obviously, that needs a lot more work on his blocking compared to those two, but he's still solid. You need to block as a tight end. And Pat did that last year for Pittsburgh, right? He was very good at that. And not only did he do that, he added on the yards that we just talked about, right? He's not the fastest tight end out there, but he uses his physicality to get open. He's a very good route runner. You can see he cuts very well to get open, right? He makes a lot of herky-jerky moves to get open. So, listen, I think that's another spot right there, another young guy to add into this pool of, talent that Pittsburgh has. And I think they're going to do special things with him this year. I think 600 yards for him, 65, 70 catches, with probably 5-6 touchdowns. I think I'll go a little under on the touchdowns from what he had last year. I think is respectable. Right? I think that's what he'll do this year. And I think that he'll soon be a maybe not top 5, but top 7 tight end in this league very soon. Definitely top 10, I think, after this year, probably around that, floating in that 9 to 10 range, right, for Pat. So, listen, I like him a lot. I think he's a great tight end. I think he's young. I think people need to talk about him more, right? And I think that he's a really key part of what this team is trying to do offensively moving forward. Let's get to the strongest part of this team, right? Because I feel like I had to get to it eventually. Let's talk about the defense, right? Listen, this is where this team really lives, right? Through their defense. The Steelers have always lived through their defense, right? 7 Super Bowl championships for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? 6. They've always lived through their defense. Always, no matter what. They've always been able to live through their defense, right? You look at Troy Polamalu, right? Some of the legends that have come through Pittsburgh. So they've always lived through their defense, and that has been the key for them the last 2 or 3 years, right? It starts with TJ Watt up front. Rookie of the year last year, right? Absolutely incredible from TJ Watt last year. 22.5 sacks. You'll never see anything like it again. You probably never will. For a long time. I should repeat that. TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year last year, extremely well-deserved. Extremely well-deserved. And I think he could win it again this year. He's that incredible of a talent. His ability to get to the quarterback, his speed off the line, and his ability to not only, outrun offensive linemen, he's so much faster, and his also ability to outstrength them makes him a nightmare matchup. You have to double team him every single time you play Pittsburgh, because when you're an opposing quarterback playing Pittsburgh, you understand that when I'm in that pocket, there's a pretty good chance that TJ Watt's coming around my blind side or coming around. If you're a lefty, he's coming around that side, and if you're a righty, which most quarterbacks are, he's coming head on, he's coming face on to you, and you got to understand that he's coming. He's coming really quick. And look, it's a scary sight for opposing quarterbacks going up against TJ Watt, knowing that he had 22.5 sacks last season, which was just absolutely incredible. I think the second highest was Myles Garrett last year. I think he had 15. So that was, it was just ridiculous what TJ Watt did last year. One of the best years I've seen from a defensive player, in my opinion. I think last year, obviously, Aaron Donald's still a better defensive player, but I think TJ Watt's not far behind. He really isn't. He's right there. He's really right there. He's probably the 3rd best defensive player, 2nd best in this league. Maybe you put Ramsey 2 and then put TJ 3. But he's right there, I'll tell you that for sure, 100%. I think now, the next guy we got to talk about is the recent pickup from Jacksonville, Myles Jack. I thought that was one of the best pickups of the offseason. Myles Jack is, a superstar linebacker. He's one of the best linebackers in the league. He's an incredible tackler. He knows how to guard tight ends. He's very physical. He's a leader. He'll be a leader on this team defensively for sure. He's the guy who voices his opinion all the time. Gives motivational speeches to the defense. So, look, you saw what he did in Jacksonville. He was a force to be reckoned with in Jacksonville, and he'll be the same in Pittsburgh. Possibly even better. He's still relatively young, too. Possibly be even better in Pittsburgh, and I say that because Pittsburgh has a better defensive system organized than Jacksonville. So he could be even better at Pittsburgh, which is really scary, to be honest. Right? So, a big year I expect for Myles Jack in Pittsburgh, and I think that was an incredible pickup and took their defense from an A defense to an A-plus defense, and I'm going to tell you why I think they're A-plus at the end of this video. So you go to the next linebacker spot, right? Devin Bush, right? Somebody who struggled so far in his career pretty early, but has showed a lot of flashes and a lot of signs of being a very good linebacker at times. The biggest issues with Devin Bush has been his inability to guard tight ends and his inability to really get to the quarterback, right? That's been his biggest thing. And I think that when you look at Devin Bush, I think that he has all the talent. I think that maybe the focus or maybe the maturity's not there. It's hard to tell with Devin Bush. But I think that Devin Bush will turn it around this year. I really do, because I think he's very talented. And looking at him in preseason, looking at him in training camp, he's looked better than he ever has. So I do think Devin Bush will turn it around this year personally. I think he'll have a much better year for Pittsburgh than he's had in years past. And I think that this will be the year that, hey, I think he has a contract year this year coming up as well, I believe. So big year. A lot of times guys play their best, right before that contract year because they have to, or else, they may not have a team in next year. So, and they may be on a lower end deal. So, look, I think Devin Bush is going to have a good year. I think, he's looked good so far, like I said, preseason and training camp. So I expect a good year from Devin Bush, hoping for 80 plus tackles this year for Devin Bush and a couple sacks. So hopefully that can happen. I think the next guy we got to keep our eyes on is Cameron Heyward, right? Veteran, been around a long time, but still really consistent at what he does and very good at what he does. 10 sacks last season for Cameron Heyward, which was incredible, I thought. So, listen, Cam Hayward's a force, right? And he's got the veteran IQ too, right? He knows how to get to the quarterback because of his physicality, right? That's the biggest thing that separates him. His speed isn't bad, but his physicality is what separates Cameron Heyward. And also his IQ. He's been in the league for so long, right? He knows which guys to attack on the offensive line, right? He knows how to go about his attack, right? His footwork is incredible. That's another thing that reporters always rave about, talking about Cameron Hayward's footwork, right? Because footwork is so important as a defensive lineman, having that footwork to get past an offensive lineman. His footwork is very, very good. He's very strong. Like I said, he uses his strength to get through the offensive line. And you really can't double team him because you got to double team TJ. So you leave Cameron Heyward more opportunities to make sacks. So I expect 9 sacks next year for Cameron Heyward. I expect 1 down from last year, but still a very good year for someone who's at that age, and a very good year for anyone, but especially someone at that age. So definitely big things ahead again for Cameron Heyward next year. Hopefully his career can continue to keep going at this high of a level. He's been a big fan of his game. I think, we talked about the linebackers, the defensive line. I think we got to go into the secondary, right? And the main guy in that secondary is Minkah Fitzpatrick, right? And Minkah Fitzpatrick, if I were to label the best tacklers at the safety spot, I think Minkah Fitzpatrick or Budda Baker would take the crown. One of those two. 124 tackles last season for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Incredible tackler. Very, very, very good in the zone, too, in coverage. Great coverage. Man-to-man coverage, not quite as good, but still solid. But in zone, he's very, very good. He covers zones very well. He's a high IQ player, right? He doesn't jump a lot of balls, right? He's not trying to get interceptions. It's not how he plays the game. He's trying to make the best plays in coverage he can, right? He gets a lot of deflections. He definitely scares opposing quarterbacks to throw his way, and throw big time plays down the field because Minkah's always going to be there making a play on the ball, right? He's a ball hawk. He's everywhere on the ball. And like I said, to add on that, he's an incredible tackler, right? Breaking through holes, doing a great job of he's using his speed to get to the ball carrier, which is something he's done really well. So I think he had 2 picks last year. He's never really been high in the pick chart, like I said, but incredible tackler, and that's, Miami drafted him really high a couple years ago out of Alabama, and that's why they got him so high, right? We know he's one of the best tacklers in football at his position. So, yeah, that's a big thing with his game, and I think for him to continue that is extremely important. At the other safety spot, you got Terrell Edmunds, who's always been probably like a 78, 79 overall guy, but has never really taken that next step to take that next level. But he's not a bad safety. He's a pretty good safety. But I think if this year he kind of does the same thing as he's done the last couple of years, I think they'll look to move in a different direction from Terrell Edmunds, if you ask me. That's just my personal opinion. Like I said, I don't think he's a bad safety. I just don't think that he is... I don't think he's a bad safety, but I just don't think he's ever taken that step in the last couple of years where they can be like, oh, man, this is our guy long term. Like, this is our guy. I think he's a good player. Obviously having Minkah helps him a lot because it takes a lot of pressure off him at the safety spot, if you ask me. But like I said, I think, especially, he was a first-round pick, I believe. So I think, you're going to, we're going to have to see a little more out of him this year, in my opinion. If you look at the corner spot, right, you're pretty good at the corner spot. You're not bad, very underrated, right? Justin Lane, pretty solid corner in my opinion. Relatively young, had a very good season last year. I expect him to have a better season this year. Maybe a Pro Bowl type of season. Maybe not this year, but next year if he can continue to play at the level and improve at the level he's improving at. So I like his game a lot. And then at the other corner spot, to wrap up this roster, you have Levi Wallace, who is kind of similar to like Terrell Edmunds in a way, not his play style, but the fact that like he's been in the league for a couple years and he's good, but he's never taken that step where it's like, okay, this is our guy, right? Solid corner, physical, Levi Wallace is a very physical corner. That's the one thing about him. He's very physical. Receivers have a tough time with his physicality, but he does get burned off the line a decent amount. So I think that, like, when you look at that with Levi Wallace, I think that just improving there, I think, is the big thing. I think this will be his fifth year upcoming. So the contracts are starting to kind of get different for someone like him soon. So I think this is his last chance too. Or else Pittsburgh maybe try to move him to the slot and then try to go pick up another corner. They had Mike Hilton, but he went to Cincinnati last year, so that was a big loss for them. So let's see what Pittsburgh does there. I don't think he's a bad corner. I think Levi Wallace is a solid corner, and I think teams would love to have him. But I think Pittsburgh is kind of saying, hey, you could probably be our slot corner or number 3 corner instead of our number 2 corner if you don't play well this year. So if you stay the same as you did the last couple of years, which is not bad, like I said, but it's pretty good, not great. This has been a longer podcast than I expected, but we're at 30 minutes now. But let's wrap it up and go over their schedule. I'm going to pull up their schedule here. Give me a second. Wrap it up by pulling up their schedule, and then I'll close it out. And tomorrow I'm going to have one too. Tomorrow I'm going to do the Cincinnati Bengals, so expect that one to come tomorrow too. So week 1 in Cincinnati, I think they'll drop that game. Week 2 New England, I think they'll win. I think they'll catch a win against New England at home. In Cleveland, I think they'll win that game. I'm going to tell you why. No Deshaun Watson, right? You're going to have Deshaun Kaiser. That's crazy. Jacoby Brissett is at quarterback. Still unproven, really. Not bad. Good backup, not a starter. I think Cleveland's going to struggle this year without Deshaun Watson. So I think they go to 2-1 after that, right? I think then you have the Jets at home. I think they'll go to 3-1. In Buffalo, you'll lose. You'll go to 3-2. Tampa at home, I think you'll lose 3-3. And you go in Miami, I think you'll lose 3-4. In Philly, 3-5. New Orleans at home, I think they'll snag a win there. I really do. 4-5. I think New Orleans is going to be good, but I think New Orleans is one of those teams that will also, lose to pretty good teams like the Steelers or like 500 teams like the Steelers, on the road. I don't think New Orleans will win those kind of games. Then you have Cincinnati. I think that's a win at home. You go to Indianapolis, you'll lose that game. Then you go into Atlanta, I think you'll lose that game. Baltimore at home, I think you'll lose. In Carolina, I think you'll catch a win. Vegas at home, I think you'll lose. Baltimore on the road, you'll lose. And Cleveland at home, you'll win. So, I have them finished 7-10 this year. Like I said, I think it's, a lot of it's going to be, I think like next season they'll make the playoffs. I really do. But I think this season will kind of feel out that quarterback spot. Hopefully get Najee, in that top 3, top 5 running back, like I said, in the league. And, really see what he's able to do, with a little bit better of an offensive line. And I think this year will be a really big test year for Pittsburgh. They're going to be one of the more fun teams in the league to watch. So when you guys get a chance, when you're watching games on Sunday, if Pittsburgh's playing, tune in. Because they're going to be really exciting to watch. I think that's they're going to be a very exciting team to watch for sure. And I like what they can do a lot. So that's going to wrap it up. If you guys haven't checked, check out that Dolphins podcast, and we'll get that Bengals podcast going tomorrow. And I appreciate it.